guess we did have to wait until the stars collided. Hello everyone, you're watching a new brand spanking new episode of ElliXia's Discography Dives. Welcome back. It's been much longer than I care to admit since we were last here. This is a series in which we delve into the discographies of some of my favourite artists. And this season, for what feels like it's been an eternity, we are diving into the discography of none other than Dame Sophie Ellis-Bextor. And this was in the lead up to her 7th studio album, Hannah, which came out on the 2nd of June. It is now, as I'm recording this, the 4th of December, so we are a little bit behind on schedule, but better late than never, I suppose. Let me address the elephant in the room for the 12 loyal viewers who watch this series. Well aware that the last entry to this series was back in May. I profusely apologise for the delay in this new episode. I won't bore you with all the details, but basically what happened was I was filming this series in April and May, and we had Birmingham Pride in the May Bank Holiday weekend. My plan was initially to get the Wanderlust video filmed before that, but I just didn't really have the time. Or didn't use my time wisely. I had quite a busy summer actually. I did 6 consecutive weekends on the trot. I performed at 5 prides and attended another 2 more. One of my best friends got married. I had loads of stuff going on. Plus I work a full-time job as well. So like, you know, finding the time to do this is not the easiest. But I had a very busy summer with doing various different prides and stuff. And I thought to myself, you know, as things start to wind down a little bit, maybe I'll resume the series, because I'm aware that it isn't finished. Basically every weekend since the start of September, it's been like, right, I'm gonna do the discography series. I'm gonna continue on with the Sophie series. This weekend I'm gonna film it. And oh God, a lot of weekends have gone by and I still haven't done it. So here we are now. Sophie has released the album Hannah that we were in the lead up to. Not only that, but she started a tour, which I'm going to see by the way. And she's also, and she's even released a deluxe edition version of Hannah as well. So, you know, we are really far behind. But we're here, we're queer, we're never on time. And with that disclaimer out of the way, I am of course ElliXia Q Valentine, the titular ElliXia in ElliXia's Discography Dives. And of course, don't forget to like, subscribe if you like this video, give me a subscription and all that social media stuff. My socials are in the description below. You can have a link to follow me if you feel so kind. And introductions out of the way. This week we are talking about Sophie Ellis-Bextor's 5th studio album, Wanderlust. Also available in a vinyl, in a book-bound edition. This is very, oh Jesus Christ. In a book-bound edition, which is all very, you know, lovely and difficult to, you know, to turn the pages when you're holding it at this angle, but yes, here we go. And actually also available in a expanded edition, which was known as Wonder Mix, which had a bonus disc as well with some remixes on it. We were, oh, can I flip around? Oh, would you look at that? There we go, Wonder Mix. Lovely. Oh, and also I have a Wanderlust mug as well. So, cheers. Today's look is inspired semi-like by the album cover. If you look on here, she is wearing like, you know, white lace. And this is a look that was also featured in a couple of the music videos as well. Wanderlust was released on the 20th of January 2014. It reached number 4 in the UK albums charts and it yielded 4 singles: Young Blood, Runaway Daydreamer, Love is a Camera, and The Deer and the Wolf. This is an album that marked quite a significant change for our Sophie. Prior to this album, she parted ways with Polydor, as we covered in the last episode after the release of Make a Scene. Make a Scene didn't have a particularly great rollout campaign, and so I think a change was very much needed. For this album, Sophie went independent, released under her own EBGB's label, and marked quite the significant change in direction musically. Gone is the dance pop of the last album, and now we have a lot of sort of folklore-inspired or live instrumentation, Baroque-inspired music, and the lyrics focus a lot more on storytelling. There's a lot of fictional characters, there's a lot of sort of fairy tale influence. One of the things I love about this album is that Sophie clearly was relishing in her sort of creative freedom, not being bound to major label expectations anymore. She was able to experiment, and I really like that about this album. This album was also boosted greatly by an appearance on the 2013 series of Strictly Come Dancing. For any international viewers, that's basically our version of Dancing with the Stars. And Sophie did really well on that show. I think I've been 10 years literally. I believe she made it to the final. I think she was like 4th or 3rd, possibly. I have to confess, I didn't watch that series because I was in my 3rd year at uni at the time and I was just very busy, and on my weekends I'd usually be getting plastered, so I didn't really have the time for Strictly, unfortunately. But I have it on good authority that she did a very good job. This appearance on Strictly gave her quite a renewed presence in the public eye. A lot of people were aware of who she was again, and subsequently, I think following that, this album did significantly better commercially than her previous releases had done. And it's kind of ironic because this was her most commercially successful album for like a decade, but it's probably like the least commercial album she had at the time. This album was also supported by the Wanderlust tour, which I think was also Sophie's like most successful tour in a decade as well. I actually went to that tour on the opening night in Birmingham at the time, I believe it was the HMV Institute. It is not called that anymore, but you may have noticed on some of the releases that I showed you earlier that I do actually have a signature on there. It says here, "Hello Elliot." And this is because on the tour, I actually got to meet Sophie at the end of the show. I think I mentioned it in the previous videos, I've met her 3 times. This was the very first of 3 times, 7th of April 2014, I'll never forget it. It was such an amazing experience. Before the show started, I was like, do you know what, maybe if I hang around at the venue at the end of it, if there's time, I might get to meet her, who knows. But she actually said at the end of the show, oh, by the way, I'm going to be doing a signing in like the foyer at the end of the show. And I was like, excuse me? And this was for no extra cost either. And let me tell you, I was gagged. I was absolutely made up. I can just remember my heart was beating really, really fast because I was like, oh my god, it's Sophie Ellis-Bextor. And it was just, I was so excited. And she said she liked my nails as well. And I was like, thank you, Sophie, very good set, it was lovely. And it was genuinely one of like the happiest moments I think I've ever had, actually. I missed my train because I wasn't living in Birmingham at the time. I missed my last train to Malvern and had to get a premiere in. But, you know, it was worth it. It was absolutely worth it because it was just, honestly, it was just one of those experiences I'll never forget. But enough about me. Let's get on to the actual album track listing, shall we? I delayed talking about this album long enough, let's get on with it. With this album, we are dealing with a slightly shorter track listing. We don't have any B-sides. We just have your standard 11 tracks. So with that said, let's get into the first song. The first song we have is Birth of an Empire. Right away, the minute that song starts, it starts with quite a grand entrance. It's very much a statement of intent. You know fully well that you're not going to be in for your average Sophie Ellis-Bextor album. Forget what you thought you knew about Mademoiselle E.B. This has completely changed. And, you know, I think Birth of an Empire is quite ballsy. I think that's even reflected in some of the lyrics, you know, I know you're aching to move on. It doesn't matter where you are when you belong. It's like, you know, we're moving on from the past, from the not so fantastic experience with the record label, and now we're moving into a new frontier, a new era. And the intro is very grand, but the verses are actually quite subtle and it's softer. And there's quite a nice contrast because sort of the post-chorus softens a little bit again, but then it's followed up with like that bang of a crescendo echoing the intro of the song, and there's layers and levels to it. And when I saw the tour live, she did the album more or less in sequential order, and it worked very well as an opener. On to track 2, we have Until the Stars Collide. This from this album is a favourite of mine. The harpsichords at the beginning, the bass of the piano that's used in it, it feels quite late 90s indie, and it reminds me of a band from that era, but I can't quite think which one it is. Possibly The Audience. I mean, that's actually another thing about this album. There is, you know, it is somewhat reminiscent of her work with her band The Audience from the 90s. But Until the Stars Collide sings about a lost love, and about how she will always wait for them until the stars collide. Kind of like how you lot had to wait for this video. But anyway, Until the Stars Collide is lovely. I think some of the lyrics are really fantastic, like, you know, you're a page worth turning, I read you like a book. I've reached the final chapter, the story had me hooked. You're so technicolor, one for every day. On to track number 3, we have Runaway Daydreamer, and this was the album's second single. The minute I heard this album, I was like, yeah, Runaway Daydream is going to be a single. I just knew it. This is quite a pleasant song, I would say. It very much conjures up the image of like afternoon tea for some reason. It's just, I don't know how else to describe it. It just has that kind of feel about it. It's very sweet and sort of rather twee. It's very like polite. Lyrically, I enjoy it. It's a song about sort of wanting to, well, you know, enjoying daydreaming and wanting to sort of escape the world you're currently in, even if just for a moment. There's an interesting layer to it because obviously Sophie, at this point, she had 3 children at this point, and obviously being a busy woman, being a musician, being on the road, being, you know, in the studio, whatever, being in a public eye, I can imagine it is tempting to just think, oh, wouldn't it be nice to just say fuck it and just, you know, abandon it all, like, or just have a little bit of a, you know, a little bit of a respite. It kind of sort of plays into that sort of childish imagination of, you know, finding comfort and solace in like an imaginary world. And, you know, hey, I relate to that. I think a lot of people relate to that. And that's even picked up on in the lyrics as well, you know, we all seek shelter from the darker days and I know you go there too. There's like, no, you can't judge me for that. You can't clock me for being a daydreamer because look, we all do it. Runaway Daydreamer has like nice elements about it. It's not a favourite of mine. The single edit would have benefited from like, I don't know, a bit of zhuzh. It could have benefited from having a donk put on it or something, do you know what I mean? Just give it that little bit of extra oomph, you know, because it is a very sort of soft and gentle song. And I think, you know, it works well for radio, it's very radio too, but like, you know, there's a little hidden banger in there somewhere, and I think like an extra layer of beef would have, or something, I don't know, you don't do layers of beef, do you? You know what I mean? On to track number 4 we have, and I think this is one of my personal favourites on the album, and that is the Deer and the Wolf. This is really sort of like the first fairy tale kind of song on the album. It's somewhat jovial and sings about a deer and a wolf. 2 very different animals in the animal kingdom, who, you know, one is hunted and one is a hunter, and they are very different and at odds with each other, but however, when it really comes down to it, they're actually very similar, and like in this instance, they need each other. I love some of the lyrics that we're both in tune when we're facing the moon, but under the sun, I'm hunted just like you. Because I think that's kind of reflected from real life, you know, a lot of the time we have like, you know, we all have our enemies and people that we don't like, but in a lot of cases, we are actually very, very similar. And the Deer and the Wolf is quite cutesy. It has a somewhat indie feel to it, which I think is actually somewhat, it wouldn't sound too out of place on Trip for like Fantastic, like maybe it's like a B-side, but you know, it was probably the first song on the album where I felt like, oh, this feels quite Sophie-ish, you know, because as I said earlier, there is quite a radical change in direction, so that little bit of familiarity upon first listen is quite nice. Deer and the Wolf was the 4th and final single from the album, released in August of 2014. And it had a music video as well where Sophie was singing, like, it's just in like this sort of, was in the studio, but it's like a forest but like with like paper trees and stuff like that. It's very cute. And she looks gorgeous as always. We then move on to track number 5, which is this album's centerpiece and the lead single, Youngblood. Youngblood is a lovely song. I really like it. It's definitely a song I've grown to appreciate more as I've got older as well. Sophie said that the song was inspired by a conversation she had with her mother, Janet Ellis, about her marriage to Sophie's stepdad, who sadly is no longer with us. And it was inspired by a conversation where Janet said, you know, you can, I'm obviously paraphrasing here, but you can be in love with somebody, you can know somebody for years and be with them for years. There's always going to be a part of you that still sees them as the way they were when you first fell in love. And I think that is very true, and I think that's very, very beautiful. No matter how old you may physically get, no matter what changes and what happens, you will always see each other, you know, the way you did back, you know, all those years ago. And I think that's a very beautiful sentiment. And it makes the song, you know, when she does it live, it does make it very emotional. I haven't seen any tour set lists, spoilers or anything for this one, but if she does sing it live, when I see her this time around, I'm probably going to cry, probably. Yeah, it's a very lovely song. I remember Youngblood's history actually as well. So she performed it in November 2012. I can't remember what event it was at, but she performed like a piano version of it. And this was the first taste we had of Wanderlust. I remember hearing it and thinking, oh, this is nice. Because I remember around the time that she's began work on Wanderlust, she did say, like, look, this isn't going to be your average, my traditional album, this is going to be quite different. And I think Youngblood was a very lovely way to sort of like soft launch into this new era of the Sophie sound. The demo of the song was released as a free download in March 2013. I remember that as well, and I really liked listening to it. A while later, in November of 2013, she finally released the finished version, which was a lot more polished, and I really liked it. I thought, oh, it's just so lovely to hear it properly. There's some lovely strings, there's some lovely lyrics, there's some lovely choir sounds as well. It's just a really, really lovely piece of work. And I haven't mentioned this yet in the video, actually. I should also give, we've got to give props to Ed Harcourt. He is the main producer and main collaborator on this album. He produced every track, and this was the first album in a trilogy of records she has done with Ed Harcourt as well. We've got to give our shout out to our Ed, because, without him, we wouldn't be having this album. So thanks, Ed. Not that you're going to watch this, but... Youngblood actually managed to chart as well in the top 40. It reached number 36, I believe, in January 2014. And to date, this is Sophie's, most recent chart topper. So it's nearly been a decade, but you never know. You never know. You never know what could happen. But if she never has one again, that's a lovely one to go out on. We then move on to track number 6, which is just titled Interlude. And that's what this song is. I mean, to be fair, right, it's called Interlude. It's practically a full-length song, really. But it's called Interlude. It serves as like a halfway point for the album, signalling a more experimental second half. On the vinyl, it is actually, not that you can read that. It is actually, can you read that? It is actually the last track on side A as well on the vinyl. It's a pleasant enough track, somewhat nostalgic. It feels very sort of old-timey, and there's the sound effect of a steam train, which becomes like the percussion on the track, which I think is a nice little touch. Lyrics about like going past on a train and like seeing fields, and lyrics about coming home. It's very lovely, and it's very cozy. Following the interlude into side B, we have track number 7, which is 13 Little Dolls. Now, 13 Little Dolls, now that one's a banger. I really, really enjoy this song. It's definitely the most up-tempo song on this record. Very much has a witchcraft folksy kind of feel. It's quite stompy, and I can imagine like some kind of like witchy ritual where like everyone's kind of like maniacally dancing around each other. Lyrically, it's very, very much in the fairy tale. The main character in the song has these dolls that have been bestowed upon them, and that are a curse and a blessing at the same time, because it's like, well, I'll never be alone, but also I'll never be alone. I think the ideas for like a music video for this song could be endless. I think there's, I would love to do a performance of the song one day and just like lose my shit on stage. But it absolutely goes off. I think like this is the only song on the album that's on my workout playlist, because it's kind of like the closest to a bop, shall we say. And I love how it climaxes towards the end, like the last chorus really does just go off. Track number 8 is Wrong Side of the Sun. This is a very melancholic sounding song, somewhat melodramatic, kind of sings about like an apocalypse. Like about like, a massive heat wave that's just like burnt out everything. It's not exactly the funnest song, but melodically it's very pretty. And do you know what? Had I filmed this video in the summer like I was planning to, I would have actually said, well, there's lyrics in the chorus, I prayed so hard the rain would come, and it's like, well, this summer just gone, rained all the time. So her prayers were answered, maybe a decade too late, but they were answered eventually. Wrong Side of the Sun wasn't a single, but it did get the remix treatment on the Wonder Mix CD. Remix of Wrong Side of the Sun is pretty good, even though it doesn't really sound like much from the original song is used, and it very much sounds like that Fatboy Slim song right here, right now. It's very reminiscent of that. On to track number 7, we have Love is a Camera. This was the album's 3rd single, released in June of 2014. Now, I've got to tell you, Love is a Camera is definitely one of the album's strongest points. It's straight up folklore inspired. It has like a waltz melody, I don't know the exact time signature of a waltz, but it's that time signature. It's creepy, it's sinister, it's very much gather round, let me tell you a story. And I think like in all the sort of folklore inspired fairy tale songs, this one is definitely the best one. This one does it the best. Lyrically, it sings about a witch who lives on a house on the hill where she lures people in and she takes a photo of them, and when she takes that photo, the subject of the photograph's soul gets stuck inside the photograph and she has them for eternity. The verses are from the perspective of one of the victims who, in the lyrics, is now trapped behind glass and sees more fools pass. It's very much a cautionary tale of, avoid this witch. But the chorus and the middle eight are from the perspectives of the witch herself. Stand still evermore, pose for eternity with me. Your soul on my wall, love is a camera of memories. Another song I would love to perform myself one day, I just haven't quite found the right avenue for it. I also really like how the end of the song, it speeds up. And becomes almost quite farcical, as if it's it conjures up the image for me of like running away from the lyrics is run away from the house on the hill. It very much pictures the image of like running at a very fast pace to try and outrun this witch, and it hikes up the urgency, and how highlights how dangerous this witch really is. Track number 10, we have Cry to the Beat of the Band. This is a song that I have to admit it didn't really stick with me, but when listening to this album and to Sophie in general for this series, which has been going on for a very long time, I actually really liked this song. Like every album, I've kind of had like a song where I've been like, oh, I actually really like this. Why haven't I been paying more attention before? Prior to the Beat of the Band has a very sort of like kind of stompy feel. There's a lot of claps in it. It's very mournful. Lyrically, it speaks about a bride who has left her groom at the altar, and she's running away from this church, and she's racked with guilt because she knows that he stood in the church in front of everybody who's there, and his heart is broken. He's going to cry to the beat of the band. He's literally going to cry to the beat of the band. Again, there's a great use of choir in it as well, singing the chorus. It's very dramatic. It's very full on. I can easily picture like a very dramatic music video to this of like Sophie is like in like a bridal gown that's, I don't know, somewhat tarnished with like makeup smeared and everything. It's also got the remix treatment as well on the Wonder Mix album, and the remix for that is really good actually. Somewhat house-like, it's got a lot of piano in it. It's very similar to Cammy's theme from Street Fighter 2, and that is very high praise because the Street Fighter 2 soundtrack is absolutely banging. And closing off the album, we have a very lovely ballad which is called When the Storm Has Blown Over. This is a very peaceful song, singing about how, well, when the storm has blown over, we will pick it up again and regroup and everything will be all right. I think it's a really lovely song, especially given that the second half of the album is somewhat chaotic. It's a nice way to sort of like cool off, I suppose. But when I saw the tour, it was a very lovely way to end it. If I remember correctly, she sang it without a microphone as well, which is quite a tradition that she does at her gigs now, where she'll do the last encore just with her voice, and it's always very, it's a moment. I know like weathering the storm can be a bit of a cliche in, song lyrics, but it's a lovely message and it's delivered with a lot of sincerity and it's very gentle. And that sums up Wanderlust. Like I said, there's not a lot here in terms of numbers of tracks, but there's more than enough in terms of quality. This is an album that I took a little while to get to grips with, I think, when it came out. Came out in the January of 2014, and I think because it's not the most instant pop album, it does reward repeated listens, and it's quite atypical, of what Sophie was known for at this point as well. So I can understand why it'd be a bit of a jarring experience for some people. It wasn't really for me until I saw the album performed live on the tour, because I bought tickets to see the tour, because this was the first album that Sophie had released and toured with, following me becoming a full-on fan, so I was like, this is my first opportunity to see her. Following seeing the album live, with a live band, it made a lot more sense to me. I was like, oh, I get it now. This album's really clicking with me, and I really do enjoy it. Yes, of course, my preference And my favourite Sophie Ellis-Bextor songs are the pop bangers. I can't lie, I can't deny that. But I very much appreciate this album for what it is. I think it's really great that she was able to do an album that she wanted to do and that she was in control of, because a lot of pop singers do not get that opportunity. And I'll always have the utmost respect for, an album like this, where it's the singer doing what they want to do. I think this album kind of, refreshed her career quite a bit as well. And for that, I will always be grateful. So sip that tea. And that wraps up Wanderlust. Don't forget to tune in next time. Notice I say next time and not next week. And we will be discussing 2016's Familiar, which, yes, you may notice has a signature, because yes, I saw her live on this tour as well. Thank you very much for watching. I have been ElliXia Q Valentine. Lovely to see you again. Don't forget to stay safe and keep well, and I will see you next time. And in the meantime, please book me. Mwah.